RPPD. Before we start with the webinar as such, let me give a short introduction to the chairperson today. The session is being chaired by Professor P.K. Vishwanathan. He is head of the department and dean of the School of Management at Amrita Vishwavidyapitham. Before joining Amrita Vishwavidyapitham, he was with the Gujarat Institute for Development Research, and he has done substantial amount of work relating to rubber, issues relating to climate and rubber, and issues around these questions. Long years of work, in about 12 to 13 years, I think so, spent in GIDR, and he's a student from the Institute for Social and Economic Change. That's by way of introducing the chairperson. Now let me hand over to the chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Vinoj, for the nice introduction. The topic of presentation today is a very interesting one because of the reason that, as you all know, Kerala is one of the major producers of rubber over the past more than 100 years. But then, because of a lot of challenges that the state is facing now, the state is kind of experiencing serious problems of continuing rubber cultivation because of various reasons. And one of the major reasons that Professor Vinoj is going to talk about, the local level institutions kind of instituted by the Rubber Board, which has been the overarching institution for promotion of rubber. When that organization, which is the local level, it has been established with a lot of anticipations about its impact on the livelihoods of the rubber farmers, etc. But over the years, that local institution setup also has faced a lot of problems of existence and all, which he will be talking today. Just I wanted to give an overview of the rubber sector that we have in the international scenario, at the international level. You know that rubber is a crop which is mostly grown by the Southeast and Southeast Asian countries, South and Southeast Asian countries, including India. India was one of the major players in rubber sector until very recently. India was the fourth largest producer, and now it has India's position has gone to position 5. And again, if you look at the problems of rubber faced by these countries, you can take the case of Malaysia, earlier starter, then Indonesia, Thailand. Then there are also new countries which are coming into the rubber, like Cambodia, Laos, etc. New generation rubber economies. So the problems, by and large, I would say that these problems covered some of the main topics confining to problems of price volatility, then the emergence of pests and diseases, plant diseases, then climate change problem is a bigger challenge, then land degradation and deforestation related problem. So some of these problems are very much specific to, the first one is price factor, I mean the price related risk, the other one is basically climate related risk. So these are the two major challenges that the countries are facing with respect to rubber production. Now, continuing the rubber production or the sustainability of the rubber industry or rubber sector across these countries is actually affected by these two major challenges. One is the price volatility or the price risk or the climate related risk, where the role of institutions, the local institutions over the all the overarching major institutions should have a role. What kind of roles that they have been playing also, it becomes very important. That is what Professor Vinoj is going to talk about, which is the rubber producer societies. And the other major challenges, again, I would like to talk about is the labor management, labor crisis emerging in these economies, then market access related problems. And finally, rubber is also facing a lot of challenges with respect to how green that your production conditions are, how green production systems are kind of being adopted by these countries in terms of reducing the net effect of carbon emissions or other kind of impact on the on the environment when you produce, because rubber is considered to be a monoculture. So when you have more and more monoculture rubber cultivation happening, it will have significant impact on the environment. So how you can go more in terms of sustainability sourced production systems, that is also the other major challenge. So amidst these challenges, one of the main topic that Professor Vinoj is going to talk about, the price related challenges, again price related as well as the overall management with respect to labor management and all, where the role of rubber producer societies, how it has emerged and how whether they have been doing their right in terms of making the rubber production sustainable in a local economy of Kerala. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, good afternoon to all. Thank you very much for this reasonably better gathering than what we had last time. We were six last time. So we have, I think, 3 times of last time we have. So that's good enough to discuss rubber, I think so. So last online presentation we had 6, I think so, and offline we had 6. So this time it's all doubled. So that's very good growth rate for rubber production, actually. So this is actually a continuation of the study that we had discussed during the last presentation a month back. We had discussed the question about the institutional basis for rubber producer societies. What are rubber producer societies, and why were they? The broad motivation for doing the study on rubber producer societies was that they were aimed to be grassroots level organizations that were to support rubber producers who are small and marginal farmers, basically. But the outcomes over time seems to have been that the rubber producers themselves started failing. The societies, what we call as rubber producer societies, started failing, such that over time, a large number of the rubber producer societies were declared defunct by the rubber board themselves, who are the functionaries, who are the patrons for the rubber producer societies. And a few of them, not a few, a large number of them are still functional, but quite a few of them have been shut. And quite a few of them, they are planning to restructure and so on and so forth. Right. So that's a context in which why rubber producers as a study has been taken up, and the study was taken up at the behest of the, as recommended by the rubber board to take up the study on looking at why rubber producers societies has been failing. So today what I'm going to do is this: the first in the last study, last paper that I had presented, I had shown that rubber producer societies were failing, and the key reasons behind the failure was institutional aspects, where there were weak interlinkages between the producers, the rubber producer societies and the farmers, and also between the upward linkages between the producer societies and the rubber board, and as well as between the general society itself. The way in which the societies were placed was not very strong, such that it was kind of weakening in its positions. But today what I'm going to do is to look at, given whatever the condition of rubber producer societies are, do farmers benefit when they join a rubber producer society? That's a moot question that we're asking. Is there any benefit at all when you join a rubber producer society? That's the question that we are answering. And so this is how I have kind of designed the kind of outline of the presentation. I'll give a brief introduction and context, profile of the growers, then the member participation in RPS, then the social and economic differences between RPS members and non-members, comparing productivity and profitability of members and non-members, and differences between members and non-members in terms of input, output, and marketing. And finally, is there a skewed selection, self-selection as members of RPSs, and some conclusions and recommendations. These are the questions that I will try to answer. This is a repetition of what I had said in the last thing, but just to take you through very quickly, about 1.3 million rubber growers are there. Very small holders, holding about 0.57 hectares, one of the lowest among the holding countries as such. Small growers, fragmented, have weak bargaining power, adverse market outcomes such as poor prices, surplus quantity in the market, poor quality, inability to diversify to other products. So it's a problematic area when it comes to the farmers. The product is very industrially very demanded product, but when it comes to the farmer and the farming practices, it is actually a very fragmented kind of a market situation where the farmers are facing adverse market outcomes. So these are I had described in the last thing. I will not spend much time on these things. But if you have any doubts or queries, we can take it up towards the end. Now, there are farmers and there are dealers who doubles up as input sellers also, including selling of farm management tools, fertilizers, and other inputs as such. The quality of marketable NR, natural rubber, depends mainly on the post-tapping processing of latex that is done. Now, processing and generating dry rubber, such as the block rubber or RSS, what is called as the ribbed smoke sheets of different qualities, require processing machinery, smoke houses, etc., and so on and so forth. These require large investments that can be afforded by large estates only, not by the small growers. Now, this is where the role of actually rubber producers societies comes in place. The rubber board introduced the rubber producers society in 1986 as small growers coming under registered under the Charitable Societies Act, kind of functioning like self-help groups. Voluntary associations of self-help groups, that's the idea, and democratically functioning collectives operating in small compact area and membership ranging between 15 to 200. That's the maximum membership that you can have in these places. There were more than 2,000 of them are there across the country. 90% of them are in Kerala itself, right? However, Rubber Board had said about 20% has been defunct. About 35% are not well performing right now. Then active members in the RPSs is declining, and the RPS is losing significance in the rubber production and marketing ecosystem. In this context, the question that we ask is, do farmers benefit from joining producer collectives? The case of rubber growers in Kerala as such. How do I do it? Just excuse me for a minute. A movie in the Okay, so in terms of methods, let me tell you what the methods are by the time we get the thing on. We had done a survey of consisting of about 9,900 rubber producer societies across the state in 4 different districts of Kerala. And matching to these 100 rubber producer societies, we had collected data around the same societies consisting of members and non-members. So we had 3 members from each of the societies and 3 non-members from the same society, from the vicinity of the same society, being picked up as kind of representing the RPS itself, or what RPS of the Rubber Producer Society. So we have a a survey of a Rubber Producer Society and matching growers who are actually members as well as non-members. And this the growers picked up was the list of growers were arranged. The members were arranged by the rubber producer societies themselves and randomly picked up from there. And from there, we were able to identify non-members also around the same place, around the RPS itself. We were identifying non-members as well. So we had 400 RPSs, 99 of them are there. 1 of them was dropped due to poor data. And some samples we had to drop from the RPS members and non-members as well, finally, because of the poor quality of data in some aspects. So finally, we had about 572 households consisting of both RPS members as well as non-members as such. Just to give a brief kind of the demographic profile as such, then if you look at the age group, if you look at slightly older age group is involved. This is just the household level information about, so this does not give much information about who are the growers, but this is the household structure of the growing households as such, right? Rubber growing households as such. Now, you can go to the last section of their involvement in NR cultivation. Within the households, what is the level of involvement in NR cultivation? You can look at that. And these are all the members together within each of the household. About 26% only are actually full-time rubber cultivators. About 28% are part-time partly involved in cultivation, and about 45% are not involved. These are actually all the members within the household. So maybe one member or maybe one or two members are involved in rubber cultivation. The rest of them are not involved in cultivation as well. That is a kind of. Okay. Now, if you look at the age profile, this is pretty much known in rest of agriculture also. You do see this thing, but in rubber also using that it is in the older age group that the cultivators are belonging to larger older age group, uh, whether they are full-time cultivators or part-time cultivators. If you look at the age profile of those people who are involved in cultivation, they largely belong to the age group 46 to 60, then 61 to 75. After that, they keep declining, and the younger ones are, yeah. They are owners basically. They are owners basically. Like they may not be cultivating on their own. They may not be doing the tapping, but they might be doing some kind of. They might be giving some inputs into production, but they are not the main person who is going and doing the tapping. That's a different population actually. They might get involved as tappers also, but they don't do actually the tapping business. They're basically owners, land owners. They might be helping out, but they are not the main. So in the labor part, I have put these things, but this is not there in this particular. They are not the. When I say cultivated, it is not as if that they are sitting, they are doing the full cultivation work as such. It is basically fully, but if you ask them, are you fully involved in rubber cultivation? They do answer this question. They say they're fully involved in, because they don't have any other source of income. This will be their main source of income, and they would survive with basically using this thing, right? So this is the profile. If you look at 46 to 60 and 61 to 75, that's the major age group, and the younger ones are not involved, as is kind of seen in all kind of crops as such. Who is involved within the household? It's mainly the self or the head of the household, largely, and then the spouse of the head of the household. And children are generally not involved in this thing at all. So either the self of the or the head of the household, partially or fully, and the spouse also seems to have some engagement, but mostly otherwise not engaged with the rest of the household. Level of education, if you look at less educated, those who are not involved have a much higher level of education. If you look at, compared to those people have some partial involvement until up to 7th standard, 8th to 12th standard. That's the maximum you will find full-time or part-time. 8th to 10th standard level of education, that's where you find the maximum participation. So up to 7th standard, you will find part-time or full-time participation. But after 11th, 12th, or beyond that, the involvement is much lesser. So if you look at the profile, who's involved, basically it's an older population with less education. That's the basic idea. That's what you would see over here. Now, in terms of RPS, the rubber producer societies, when you are when there is a rubber producer society in a particular location, you can become a member by through various means. You can usually it is through a rubber boards campaign that the rubber producers society, a grower becomes a member of the particular thing, but they can also become member on their own volition. They can just go and join voluntarily also. There is no particular rule which says that you can or cannot do. The only rule which says that you should be a rubber producer, basically. You should have land and you should be producing rubber. That's the only rule which says the. But the members, once they join the rubber producer society, there is no exit mechanism actually. Once you join, you are a member forever. Till you die, you are a member, right? So you can only have this thing. One is an active member or an inactive member. That's the only possibility, or you can be a non-member. So of the sample that we had collected, we had this many 572 people we had collected. We had 18 of them had not revealed what was their status in terms of membership at all. 327 of them are active members. 21 of them are non-active members, and 206 of them were non-members. So total we had about 554 members for which we could do some analysis as such. The members here, it would mean that these are grower households, right? These are the number of households that we were able to capture. How did you become a member? to decision to take the membership, we had asked this question, and most of them responded saying that it was their own decision to join. But about 21%, if you look at the last column over there, you can see that to avail the price incentive scheme of the state government, about 21 or nearly 21.5% had joined quite recently in 2015. The Rubber Producing Society came into being in 1985, out of which about 21% of the members currently are there as members to avail the what is called as the RPIS incentive scheme, Rubber Producers Incentive Scheme, which was introduced only in 2015. So they had very recently joined to become members of the RPIS as such. But otherwise, you had 51% of them saying to join on their own volition as such. Now, if you compare between the members and the non-members, there is some difference. Right? If you look at this is the income classes that is mentioned below. On the right side, you can see the kind of the percentage or the density over there, and you can see that the RPS member households are relatively better off than the non-member households. If you look at the yellow line over there, RPS, that is Rubber Producer Services. If he's a part of a member, if he's part of the Rubber Producer Society, he seems to be slightly well off compared to the non-member household. Both of them are rubber growers, but the RPS member is slightly better off than the non-RPS member, being a member in the Rubber Producer Society as well. In terms of land holding also, if you look at, we find the same difference. That is, if you divide the land holding into marginal, small, and medium, all of them are actually small or medium holders. They don't have large holders in this particular sample. But if you look at the sample, you can see that RPS members are relatively better off. You have a larger share of people who are holding small holding or medium holding compared to non-members who are largely marginal holdings. So in other words, yes, we have this members and non-members within RPS, but the non-members seem to be worse off with smaller land holding and poorer income compared to RPS members, which are richer, who are richer and probably holding larger land holding also. Now, this raises the question as to whether they are belonging to two different population itself. Are the RPS members and the non-members belonging to the same population? Are they representing two different aspects itself? And are there problems of entry exit to RPS? Maybe there is nothing called at the entry level, there may not be any entry barrier as such, but there may be something behind which is holding them. We don't know that. We have not done enough analysis to show that there is some kind of entry barrier over there, but we have done some kind of mean testing, and it clearly shows that there is the difference between the members and non-members are statistically significant. Okay, so that's one. So which would mean that there is some certain amount of exclusion that is going on, certain type of exclusion that is going in terms of membership. But why that exclusion? What is the route to that exclusion? That's not very clear. We need to look further into that. We had looked at caste-wise, gender-wise, and all those things. Those things does not seem to be very significant, but that is a kind of thing. Now, what we are doing now is to kind of, now that we have looked into members and non-members, what we are going to do now is to kind of look at three basic aspects, looking at cost of cultivation, yield, and profitability. We take three of these parameters and then compare between members and non-members and see what is happening to, when you are a member, does it make any difference in participating in the rubber producer societies as such, right? So on the left side, these are the costs. These are the items under which cost of cultivation is involved for rubber production: plantation material, plant protection chemicals, rain guarding, tapping, processing, testing, grading, transportation, and so on and so forth. These are all the activities over there. The average cost per acre has been calculated for members, non-members, and all these things. And you can see that the average cost per acre for a year is about 24,000 rupees for the non-members, and for the members it is about 32,000 rupees. So the members actually is having a much higher cost than the non-members over here, and the average cost is about 29,000 rupees. So apparently it might look as if that the members are worse off than the non-members by having an additional cost. But what's happening here is that it is the members who have access to all the channels through which they can actually spend on inputs. Members have the possibility of taking an insurance, doing transportation, grading, testing, processing, and all. If you look at the numbers on this side, number of growers, if you look at that, will give a sense of how many of them are actually involved in each of these activities. Just to give a sense of it, transportation, you can look at the number of transportation is important for all, whether you are a member or non-member, it is important, right? But the cost involved in transportation that is incurred by only 243 members involved, they do incur some form of transportation cost, but only 139 of the non-members incur some form of cost over there, right? Now, to get the role of RPS in this thing, we are giving the cost of cultivation. What is the role of RPS over here? Let's have a look at the functions of the rubber producer society. These are the functions that the rubber producer society is supposed to do. I've written the functions over there, then the economic activity and the partners through which they should be doing these things. You have to, the first function is the productivity increase, basically through technology diffusion, new seedlings, new tapping techniques, rain guarding, etc., and so forth through the rubber board. Then you have, you can have product differentiation through value-added products, grading, and so on and so forth. Then you have providing better price for output, basically through aggregation of rubber, group sales, and price information, and so on and so forth. Then reducing the cost of production by group purchase of inputs, internalization of inputs through labor banks and training for self-tapping, and so on and so forth. And then you have lower cost of processing through group processing, storage, and transportation, and risk reduction basically through livelihood diversification, intercropping, financial assistance through grants and subsidies, and other welfare activities. These are the broad functions that the rubber producer society is supposed to be doing, and they are supposed to be, if a rubber producer society is very active, then that society may be involved in all of these activities, right? And we are assuming that it is through the activities that we had mentioned, through those particular functions that the rubber producer societies had mentioned, these cost of cultivation, the ability to enter into these costs and to kind of enjoy, at least have those particular activities being done through the rubber producer societies, the members are able to do, and non-members are not probably able to do, and therefore the costs are seeming to be higher over there. Now, if you look at the yield per acre by membership, here is what the difference that what you are seeing as the cost of rubber production. You can see it in terms of the yield, that the benefit in terms of yield that comes to the rubber producers. For the members and the non-members, you can see the last line over there shows the yield per acre over there. Yield per acre is 518 kilograms in 2018-19 for non-members, while for members it is 647.9. So it's a huge increase in the yield per acre, even though the cost of production is higher per acre for this. So the cost is converting to a large rise in yield for this. The average yield over there given us. On the left side, what you are seeing over there are the different grades of latex or rubber that is produced. Latex DRC, RSS 3, ribbed smoke sheet 3, 4, 5. These are the different grades. And most of what we produce, in what is produced actually, what is used in automobiles, RSS4, and that is where most of the demand for rubber goes into. RSS4 where most of the demand goes into, and the other major products that India produces are RSS4, and after that it is latex DRC and field coagulum. Right, these are the three products. In terms of, I'll show you in terms of pricing also. There is, in terms of prices, they differ a lot, but in terms of quantity of output that is produced, this is how it looks like. Now, converting that revenue and cost, we calculate the revenue on the basis of the total output that is produced and the price that is given, and converting that into revenue. You can see, and revenue per acre and cost per acre is calculated, and we calculate the revenue minus cost. That is a gross profit per acre of land. And as you can see, the members enjoy a much larger profit compared to the non-members, about 40,000 per acre compared to the non-members, about 33,000. Now, the advantage, the members enjoy this advantage basically from two sources. If you look at one source, is of course it is about the way in which the members are able to use buy inputs from the through the rubber producer societies. But the other is actually getting this price advantage. Now, if you look at the average price of each of these grades, if you can look at it, for the members it is actually higher. The members are able to get a higher price. For example, if you look at latex DRC, the average price per kilo is 108 rupees. Compared to the non-members, it is only 104 rupees. there is some price difference between the members and the non-members over here. And therefore, there is a price advantage also that the members are able to get. This is one of the functions, again, of the RPSs, to be able to bargain in the market and able to get some price advantages. So consistently, almost across all the commodities, except for the most important one, which is the RSS4, where there is only the price difference is marginal. In fact, the non-members have a slightly higher price than the members themselves. Now that comes basically because of they directly deal with the dealers rather than through the RPSs, and that I'll show you. But anyway, there is this price advantage as well as the input advantage, which gives them the profitability through these two aspects as such. Now, till now we were talking about membership, whether you're a member or not. But we have not looked at the quality of the rubber producer societies. We have just said whether you are a member of rubber producer society or whether you are not a member of the rubber producer. The rubber producer societies are basically as I had described in the beginning, they are actually democratically governed societies to be elected members working for their own good and doing the activities that leads to betterment of the that should lead to the betterment of the livelihood of the rubber farmers themselves, right? The governance of the rubber producer society has the following structure. You have a president, you have an executive committee, and then you have the society members. And the mode of selection is by election by the for the president is the election by the RPS members. For the executive committee is the election by the RPS members, including +1 rubber board representative is there. And society member is based on the membership criteria itself. The functions are written over there, and the decision-making powers are also given over there. Now, the bylaws of the governing body of the RPS says that elections should be done once in 2 years, and they should members cannot be rotated for more than once. Those kind of rules are there, and it is supposedly a democratic functioning. And the idea is that once you are democratically electing these members, what is best for the farmers, they should be able to make a decision over there. That's the whole idea, that if the farmers think that inputs has to be bought, then the executive committee should be able to make that decision. If the farmers think that farmer prices has to be, you have to hold the commodity for some more time and then sell it at a later point so that you get a better price, then that's what the decision that is done. So basically how the RPS governance takes place, that matters a lot in how the functioning of the rubber producer society itself takes place. What we have done is to build a rubber producer society index and taking the following factors into consideration: accountability, transparency, democratic values, participation in decision making, participation in RPS, and inclusiveness in the membership. This comes from the data on the rubber producer societies themselves. And in each of these are 5 dimensions of rubber producers, what we call as the dimensions of governance for a society as such. And these dimensions has been covered in terms of looking at the following aspects: accountability in terms of annual reports and auditing account, transparency in terms of work in progress, grievance cells, and so on, and democracy in terms of regulatory in general body meetings, regulatory and executive committee meetings, elections, etc., participation decision on the basis of general body meetings and executive committees that are held, and participation in RPS in terms of the share of RPS members in the total growers, and inclusiveness in membership in the share of female growers and SC/ST growers is taken to identify the extent of inclusivity in the RPS members. This was described in detail in the last presentation, so I will not go into much into the detail of this thing. After we build the index, we have we kind of arrange the governance index. It ranges between 0 and 1, and the highest one, the topmost one, the bottommost one, and the median one looks like this thing. We have across the dimensions of the various dimensions of index, this is what it looks like, and it ranges between 0 to 1 as such, and 1 is the worst, 0 is the worst, and 1 is the highest as such. Now, what we do is we divide this governance index into 4 categories. That is, if you are ranging between less than 0.4, 0.4 to 0.6, 0.6 to 0.75, and 0.75 and greater. 0.6 is the mean that we are getting for this thing. So we have just divided 1 standard deviation away from that. The nearest to 1 standard deviation away from that, that's what we have taken. 0.6, less than 0.4, 0.6 to 0.75, and 0.75 as such. Again, the cost of cultivation is divided into this thing. If you can look at, there is some amount of pattern that you can see. If the governance index is very low, the cost of cultivation seems to be low, very low. And if the governance index is very high, as we move from 0.4 to 0, less than 4 to 4 to 6 to 6 to 0.7, there is a gradual increase in this thing. But for the last classification, you don't see this thing. That is, the cost of cultivation seems to have fallen over there. But generally, you see that as the governance index keeps increasing, you see the cost of cultivation is also increasing. In other words, better governance seems to be associated with higher cost of cultivation. That's the idea that we are trying to suggest over here. And we see the same thing in terms of yield also. Better the governance, better yield you see. That is, lower the governance index you have, lower would be the yield per hectare. You have, for less than 0.4, you have 509. For 0.4 to 0.6, you have 580. Then 0.6 to 0.75, we have about 644 kilograms as the yield per acre that year. But for the last category, 613 we are getting, which is higher than the bottom two classifications, but lower than the middle classification, 0.6 and so on. If you look at revenue and profitability, also the same thing. But in terms of profitability, if you look at, even the gradation is completely, almost completely the same as what we have seen earlier. The lowest profitability in the poorest governance, poorest governed RPSs, and the best profitability in the best RPSs themselves, right? So you have, if the governance index is at about 0.75, then your profitability is about 41,000 rupees and so on. If it is 0.6 to 0.75, about 37,000, 0.4 to 0.6, about 39,000, and 0.4. So roughly there seems to be some kind of a pattern which shows that profitability, productivity, yield, and the costs are associated with governance themselves. Now, what matters? Is it governance or is it actually the membership? We had started off by saying that it is membership. But what now we are seeing is that the governance matters also. But the question is that is it the question about is it that you have to become a member of the RPS, or is it that you can be located near an RPS which is well governed and you don't need to be a member? So that question, because this question becomes pertinent because many of the facilities that are produced given through the RPS are not necessarily exclusive for the members. You can actually engage as a non-member. You can go and buy your inputs from the RPS, not necessarily at the same price that the members are getting. You might be getting a marginally higher price, but still you can buy it from there. You can also sell your products in the RPS at some price which is acceptable by the RPS themselves. Many of the processing that is available through the RPS, it is accessible for the non-members also, right? So then the question arises, why the difference between members and non-members? Or is it a membership difference, or is it about the governance difference? Now, again, if you go back to the cost of calculation, cost of cultivation, and we divide them into 4 categories. That is low governance index and a non-member. We compare that with a low governance index, but who is that member, he's a member of an RPS which has got low governance index. Then you have a category where one is not a member but is placed near an RPS which has got high governance index. And finally, you have a member who is belonging to a high governance index RPS asset. Now, as you can see, all of them has got their benefits. If you are belonging to a low governance index and a non-member, you are the worst performer. That is, if you are non-member and you are belong to a place where your index value is very low, then your cost of cultivation is the lowest over there. It's 17,000 something. But if you are a low governance, if you are a member in a low governance index, an RPS with low governance index, your cost of cultivation could rise from 17,000 to 27,000 as such. Now, if you are a high governance index in a non-member in a high governance index, it could be higher at 28,000. And if you are a member of high governance index, that's where you suffer the largest cost, about 35,000 rupees. So there seems to be some kind of a gradation over there, that your membership and governance does seem to matter over there, right? If you look at the yield, somewhat similar results that you do get over there. But what is interesting over there is that, of course, if you are belonging to a region with very low governance index and you are a non-member, then you are the worst performer over there in terms of yield, that you get about 427 or something like that. And if you belong to a high governance region and you are a member of that particular RPS, then the gap is very large. 427 versus 665 in terms of yield. You have a huge gap in terms of yield, this thing. But if you are a member of a low governance index region, then you still have a premium that is available to you just by being a member and not being a non-member, even if it is a low governance index region. So there is some kind of a premium that is available for being a member, even if you are a low governance region as such. And if you are you are a non-member and you belong to a high governance region, there your performance is going to be worse off compared to a person who is a member of the high governance region. So governance does matter, but your membership also matters. It is not as if that if you are just belonging to better governance regions, you will end up being better off also. The patterns are somewhat similar over here. You can look at, but there is an anomaly over here. If you look at, in terms of profitability, if you look at the low governance index member, that particular member seems to be having the highest profit compared to any other categories. Of course, the low governance index and non-member, they earn the lowest profit, but compared to them, compared to high governance index figures, you still have a low governance index and the member kind of having higher profitability, even compared to a person belong to high governance index and member also. So there seems to be some anomaly over there, but generally the fact remains that compared to a person who is who's not a member and who's in the vicinity of a poor RPS, poorly governed RPS, generally the rest of them seems to be better off. And the high governance index and if you are a member, generally you seem to be better off than the rest of the group as such. Now, having said this much, we might take it that, membership is good, and if you are in a good, well-governed RPS, then you have chances of getting better yield, productivity, and profitability and all. But if you look at the ground and look at what is the degree of participation in each of these activities that the members have, that is actually quite poor. We said that the cost of cultivation arises. We have shown a set of activities and said that the cost of cultivation arises from these activities, right? But of which, how much has been taken from the RPS has to be seen. What we have shown you was the total cost of cultivation, not the cultivation cost that is arising from the RPS. If you look at the cost of cultivation that is taken from the RPS, if you look at the rubber producer societies, among the members, only 20% of the members had involved themselves with the rubber producer societies in buying inputs. Only 20% of them had bought inputs from the rubber producer societies, and non-members, about 9.7% of them bought inputs from the rubber producers. So the gains that we had seen, yes, there are some gains, but the potential for the gains is much, much higher than what they have right now, right? Now, there are, similar to rubber producer societies, we have what are called as rubber producer companies. These are what we call as Section 8 companies. Companies that are, these are organizations that are registered as companies, but kind of function like NGOs, right? They are called Section 8 companies. We'll discuss that later on. But these are rubber producer societies have their share. They invest in the rubber producer companies, and these companies are places where the societies usually go and sell their rubber to, right? Now, the growers also directly can go and sell to the rubber producer companies. The societies can also sell it to the rubber producer society. Either way, if you look at the members, in terms of membership in the RPS, only about 20 or 16% of them end up selling to the rubber producer societies or rubber producer companies. Where do they sell it? They still continue to sell largely to the private traders and dealers, where we had said that the RPS would replace them. The primary role of RPS was to kind of replace these dealers such that you do not have intermediaries in selling these products in the market, such that you are able to save on the kind of margin that they had to give it for the intermediaries themselves. Now, what about non-members? About 82% of them are selling their products in the private sector and dealers as such. So in effect, what we are saying is that still the presence of the traders and dealers, private traders and dealers are large in the sector, and RPS, yes, they do have some impact on the members, so lesser amount on the non-members, but they have largely, they are ineffective to a large section of the rubber producer society, rubber producers themselves. About 68 or 69%, even among the members, about 67% don't use the inputs from this thing. Now, but if you look at the governance index over there, classifying them again into governance index, and if you look at, you can see that as the governance index kind of gets better, the intake from RPS keeps increasing. When your RPS, when the RPS had a ranking of only, or governance index of less than 0.40, only about 5.56% of the growers took their inputs from the RPSs. But when the RPS governance rank increases to above 0.75, then about 16% of them take it from the RPSs. Now, if you take RPS and the RPC, that is the rubber producer companies together, about 30% of the inputs are taken from these establishments if the governance index of the RPS is above 0.75. In other words, what we are saying is this then, the dependence on private traders, and on the other hand, you can look at this in that private traders and dealers consistently decline from 0.85 to 0.72 to 85.19 to 72% to 70% to 50%. The dependence on the traders and dealers seems to be declining substantially when the governance of the rubber producer society is better off. In other words, what we are saying is that if you are able to administer your rubber producer societies well, then your purchase from the intake from inputs from the RPSs would improve, and not at the 19% or 20% that you're seeing right now. But in terms of sales, what percentage do they sell it to the rubber producer, the rubber that is produced? How much do they sell it to the rubber producer societies? Nothing much. Only 13% of them sell it through the rubber producer societies. They still depend upon the dealers. About 70% of them still sell it through the dealers. There is not much difference between the members and the non-members. So sales channel, that is output sales as a channel, is not an important way in which they are selling it through the rubber producer societies, while input purchase seems to be having some advantage as such. Now, if you look at the various processes that is involved, various points of processing that I have mentioned over there, if you look at this, the involvement of RPS over there is nothing much. Labor contractors, processing, transportation, storage, any of this thing, depending upon rubber producers. So as you can see, it is about 1%, 3%, 1%, 8%, 6.6%, and so on and so forth. Hardly any dependence upon the rubber producer societies for the various processing needs of the rubber growers themselves. In fact, there are only two activities which are important, that is skill training and enhancement, and information dissemination on new practices and technologies. These are the only two important activities that RPS seems to have in terms of processing. Now, those who have been in the last presentation, I had said this thing, the rubber producer, the rubber board had a special interest in actually disseminating this new information through RPSs to the rubber growers themselves, because to enhance productivity as such. And that seems to be working over here. But otherwise, the role that is played by RPSs in many of these activities seems to be quite weak in terms of, so both in terms of inputs, in terms of output, and in terms of processing, there is much that could be done for the rubber growers by the RPSs as such, and the potential is very, very high, seems to be much, much below the potential for the RPS themselves, right? Now, in conclusion, these are the broad conclusions that I have drawn. Let me read it out to you. The major points that we see are the following. Firstly, members of RPS did benefit in terms of profitability and productivity compared to non-members. Secondly, the quality of governance of rubber producer societies mattered in determining this productivity and profitability gains. Thirdly, the gains from rubber producer societies were not limited to members, but also non-members, but the relative gains were higher for the members as such. But input usage, output sales, and processing shows that while there were few takers among the growers for the RPS services, members tended to have relatively greater benefits from each of the above. The yield and profit premium received by the members were arising from the input, output, and processing activities taken up by the RPSs. However, the fact remains that these were limited to the very few growers that interacted with the RPSs and benefited from it. Because of the poor interaction between growers and RPSs, the potential to achieve greater benefits were being limited. This lack of interaction between growers and RPS, in turn, is a reflection of the lack of dynamism within the RPSs. While growers stood to benefit from RPSs themselves were not proactive. Therefore, there is need to activate the dynamism of RPSs and integrate the farmer with the RPSs. In order to improve the dynamism of RPSs, there is need to make it more inclusive and accessible to the marginal farmers and part-time farmers as well. The economic relevance of RPSs for the growers can be improved by improving the governance structure of the RPSs themselves. Thank you very much. Let me also thank Sandra over there, who has done much of the data work over here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was a very well presented work. Let us have some questions. From the participants here, then we can open up to online.
Hello, sir. Thank you for a very elaborative presentation, and it is very nicely presented. But I have some few queries. One is regarding the governance index and different performance you have taken. That whenever the governance performance index exceeding 0.75, almost all indicator, it is showing like relatively less as compared to the other more than, if it is less than 75. It means there is a invert U-shape relationship between the governance index and different indicator. What is the reason behind it? And in your analysis, in most of the analysis, you have done a simple mean comparison. But I'm curious to know whether your like two group, one treatment group and control group, they are systematically different or not. If they are systematically different, then mean comparison test, like mean comparison, can be give to a unbiased result. But if there is some like they are not systematically same, like not different, then your mean comparison test, the mean comparison of your result may leads to bias. And this is another thing. And another thing is like being a member of RPS, whether that decision is completely exogenous or it is endogenous itself within your framework. And if it is endogenous, then also this mean comparison analysis will lead to some biased result because of endogeneity. So I have one maybe suggestion that in this kind of analysis, I have also done some paper on crop insurance adoption and productivity analysis. That in that case, most of the people, they either use propensity score matching method or endogenous switching method to see the impact of a particular policy or particular membership on the productivity or performance, based on the basic assumption that whether that particular intervention or treatment is endogenous or exogenous in nature. If it is endogenous, then they will go for endogenous switching model. And if it's exogenous, then they will go for propensity score matching. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. So my part of my question is same as per Vinod, that the people who were non-members of the RPS, whether they were, first of all, they had an option to take part in that. I'm hoping yes. So then, if yes, then what were the factors that they chose that they would not be part of that? Whether what are the factors? And second is that the income, we had a difference that income of the people who were part of the RPS and others. So at what point this income has been taken within US, and after how many years where they were part of the RPS?
Okay, shall I answer this? Yeah. So thank you, Vinod and Kamal, for these questions. Those are the things that I'm worrying also about. Yeah. So see, the governance index having a kind of a U-shaped or a inverse U-shape or something like that. Maybe it is. I don't know. We tried actually. We tried looking at the data and looking at we tried looking at the scatter plots and all those things. It doesn't look like that, right? But the data does seem to show that there is a fall over there. Now, is it some kind of an outlier or something? I don't know. So I'll have to certainly check that. Maybe there is something over there. I also have noticed that something is amiss over there, or some error somewhere. Something is there. So that I need to check that thing. Whether is it endogenous? What is the decision to join? Partially yes. Partially it is endogenous, because I had shown this thing that many of the members had joined after the RPIS scheme had come in. So, but they are of very recent origin. So maybe that's something that I have to look at. I mean, members that have joined recently versus the members who had joined earlier. And that's to also respond to Kamal's question about income-wise this thing. Maybe I have to look at the members who are of recent origin compared to older ones as such, and then see whether we see the same kind of income difference in these two groups also. Something that we have to look at. Yeah, it is very much possible. But the only thing that I'm thinking, only thing that I think is that while this is a factor, the RPS recently joining RPS is a factor. The income difference across different memberships may not be much. Why I'm thinking is so because these are land that they are holding, and they've been holding it for quite some time. They don't transact much on land, so relatively lesser on transactions on land. So possibly it is there, but certainly yes, I'll have to check that. I cannot say for sure whether it is this thing. Yeah. Then, what were the factors for joining the RPS? See, initially, RPS kind of started off as in a campaign mode by the Rubber Board. That was in the 1980s, late 80s. The Rubber Board had started a campaign on bringing growers together, and then starting off RPS. Even before that, they had started off this the Amul model collecting. Instead of cow's milk, they had rubber milk latex being collected at different points and then kind of sold in the market. But they had a cooperative system earlier that failed, and that's when they started off with the RPS. So if you ask whether that decision was taken completely by the farmers, we had asked them the question. They said yes. More than 55% of them they said yes. It was their own decision to join this thing. But most of them had joined in the 1990s or something like that. And at that point, certainly the Rubber Board had some influence on these people. So, but we may not be able to say that it was the earlier members, for them joining the RPS probably was not an endogenous decision as what for the current members that they have. Current members, because they have the RPS scheme was there, that is why they entered this thing. Earlier members also joined because the Rubber Board was actually offering various forms of subsidy at some point, right? They were offering, and many of the schemes used to come through the Rubber Board used to come through the RPS, but that they have stopped. Most of the subsidy schemes have stopped. Only this RPIS, that is, it's like RPS is like what is that called? What is it called there? Procurement, what price? Something like I'm an MSP, something like I'm an MSP that is given by the Kerala government. So yes, so I think, yeah, I do agree that we need to, I need to worry on all these things. The factors, what were the factors? Even though they said, yes, it is on their own volition that they have joined, there could have been other factors. And many of them are, when you are saying that they are members, these are, as I told you, they cannot, once you are a member, you cannot get out. So they had, they became a member when probably when maybe 20 years back or 15 years or 20 or 25 years back, and their decision to join at that point, whether it may not be possible even to kind of get an information about whether they joined with under some form of this thing. But yes, it needs to be explored. There are systematic, I also think so, because that's why I showed you that income difference is there, land holding difference is there. So there is some difference between the members and the non-members. But is that difference coming out of the fact that over time they had become better off? That's something we don't know. Or is it that we have picked up wrong people? That is also possible in the sample that we have ended up picking up. Systematically, if you have picked up the wrong people, then you always end up getting such things. So that's also there. Thanks for the suggestions on propensity and switching and all those. I will look into that. Yeah, thanks.
Hello. I am Matthew Green.
No, it is for all. It is available for all cultivator growers. But the if you had to avail that, then you had to approach through the RPS, rubber producer societies. There is a form to fill and all those things.
So you need not be a member to.
No, you don't have to be a member as such. But what happens is that when you go to the rubber producer society, they will say you have to become a member. Then only they will do this processing for you. So that's how it used to.
So another thing, maybe there is some local political scenario which is also determining who is a member or a non-member. I don't know. Maybe some kind of what in some other policies, what is called as elite capture kind of.
That's what I was trying to allude to, saying that there within the group there is an income and land differences are there, and so in fact one of the recommendations that I have, a conclusion by what I have written is also this thing, that there is need for greater inclusion, right? So even the benefits, whatever the benefits are, whatever yield benefits or whatever it is, if it is there, it is actually being taken away by a small, not maybe a small group, a group of people who are well off compared to the marginal groups who are not members as such. So there should be a way of bringing those members into the members also. And whether it is an active political thing, which I am not very sure, but I think there are institutional costs of joining this thing, of membership in RPS. By institutional costs, I mean that, see, when you are dealing with a dealer, you are buying from a dealer, you're selling from the dealer. These are relations that you have had for many years together, and you have a credit system that is running, a credit line that is running for many years. So you buy and sell from the same dealer. There is a certain amount of insurance risk cover that the dealer provides you for all these things, right? It's not very easy to break away from that and join an RPS where you don't get any of these things. When in the RPS works by selling the product in the best possible market, getting the highest price and getting the inputs in the lowest price. There you cannot have the same continuous relationship that you have with the dealer. But an intermediary, however exploitative it might sound, they have a relationship. There are the smallest growers, they have a very strong relationship with the dealer. And that actually is a protection for the dealer. And that protection, unless until the RPS is able to take up that role, you may not. In fact, it might be selecting out of becoming a member because they might think that the dealer is a better way to sell the byproduct rather than getting dependent on the RPS themselves as such. Maybe, yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
I am Matthew Green from Kottayam.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to congratulate Professor Vinoj Abraham for giving a broad and nice view of RPSs. I happen to be a humble researcher on RPSs some 10 years back as a program of CDS. I am not going to tell anything about, because after 10 years, a lot of things have changed. However, I want to bring to your notice three aspects. One is in the 80s, we know that Professor P.C. Syriac, he as the chairman of the rubber board, he introduced this scheme. He was the innovator of that. At that time, rubber board was quite different. From the broad economic policies point of view, also we were different. So rubber board was the mother institution which created this sort of an institution setup. So my query is, as an institutional, from an institutional point of view, now rubber board is very weak and policies have changed. Therefore, naturally, that dampening effect would also be there in the case of RPSs. But that should not be an excuse for leaving RPSs parentless. So my point of view is that we have to argue for a better rubber policy, a healthy rubber policy. And in that policy view, RPSs should get a proper placement. That is the first point I wanted to highlight. The second point is, Vinoj Abraham, you have narrated largely from an economic point of view, I presume. But from my study, I could notice, for example, institutions like Kallara, Punkunam, these RPSs were not mere economic institutions, they were social institutions. The members' children were given scholarships, for example. And a lot of such social development activities were taken by these institutions. So again, my point of view is that we have to conceive RPSs from a much more broader perspective as an institution for local development, social development, also inclusive of economic. And my third point is, even though government of India has gone from planning process, we are still with planning, and we are with the decentralized planning. And especially from the Nava Keralam point of view, can we move RPSs as a basic institution, especially in Kottayam? We know that this is the backbone of Kottayam political and social economy. So how can we bring RPSs also as an institution for our local development, especially from a decentralized planning point of view? So these are my three observations. Again, I congratulate Vinoj Abraham for your beautiful presentation with a lot of new data. Again, I am also very happy to hear a discussion on RPSs. Thank you, and I congratulate you as well as CDS for this very productive effort. Thank you very much.
Yeah, respected Chairman, one or two small questions. Yeah, shall I raise that?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to appreciate the presentation, and very particularly the concept and the institutionalization and of the governance index. I'd like to appreciate that point. See, I have a few methodological issues. Number one, you see, when you are constructing a governance index, it's a very interesting area. You have to take a little more wider perspective in the context. See, for example, what is the percentage of members and non-members? And non-members also, you have to try to incorporate while constructing the governance index. Maybe some kind of a negative part as far as while constructing the governance index in a particular area. Certain percentage of population and cultivators are outside the RPC, the kind of a product, the kind of a cooperative framework. Then you have to put, that is something, some kind of a negative index as far as that is concerned. That should be, one can apply for that. And another thing is that there is a methodological issue. You are actually giving a kind of equal weightage to all the indices. So I feel that there one had to think about some kind of a weightage for certain index and parameters, because all of them are not in a equal footing. But I think you can work out, you can think about that. And another point you mentioned that the profile of who is involved in the process and the profile of who is not involved. If that is the case there, how can you compare, and without giving some kind of a background information, whether these groups, profile of who is involved and who is not involved? You mentioned about that there, the members and non-members, that what is actually their profile, really the profile, whether the profile is in a position to comparable or not. And again, I am a little bit confused in the methodological issue. Once you mentioned that there, the profile of who is involved in the sense that they're really who are the cultivators, quote and unquote. In some case, what happened, the profile of who is involved, you have taken the entire family as a whole. So these are some of the issues. I think you can give some kind of explanation on these issues, these questions. And again, I would like to appreciate this is actually a kind of a very challenging kind of a innovative from your side to construct some kind of a governance index and try to equate with the entire production process to this concept. And this is really a very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jose Chadhu.
Hey, hi, Vishwanath, Dr. Vishwanath.
Hi.
Hi, fine.
So I'll try to respond to a few of the queries that was raised by both Professor Mathikurian and Professor Jathulam. Broadly, I completely agree with what Professor Mathikurian had said. Understanding RPSs not as purely economic institutions, but kind of situating them within the social and cultural context also. In fact, in the this I had described that this is a second part of a paper that we had already presented, and in that paper we had focused much more on the functioning of the rubber producer societies themselves rather than looking at growers. And in that paper, we had actually spent some time looking into how should we contextualize any of these producer societies. Now, two views are there with regard to how should be seeing this. One is this managerial view where they take that producer societies are basically fulfilling the economic functions of growers and farmers, and therefore one should be analyzing producer societies in terms of the economic outcomes, which is what I have done to an extent in terms of growers. But of course, a larger literature which does talk about this thing, which says that producer societies, unless until they are located within the social context, the societies themselves will not survive, because the societies are a reflection of what is the community that you are placed in. And therefore, if you want to have societies to survive, sustain, then it should reflect the realities of the local context as such. And a number of papers has been written on this thing. Some of them failed. In fact, the examples that were given, I've been reading on this thing, examples of some certain Chinese societies which initially were successful but kind of failed over time, basically kind of trying to managerialize these societies, instead of running them as producer societies, being representing and reflecting the social context, it started becoming more professionally and managerially kind of technologically, managerially, and professionally managed rubber producer, not rubber, other producer societies themselves. But eventually they failed out. They failed out basically because they lost the connect between the farmers and they become a different establishment as such. Now, yes, so in that context, I also entirely agree with this thing. So even within in the rubber, the people who are discussing about the rubber producing societies itself, there are these two views about rubber producers, how the rubber producers in reinvigorating RPSs, rubber producer societies, how we should be doing it. And there is a kind of a view that is coming up which kind of claims that in order for the rubber producer societies to become sustainable, they should be made to become managerial entities themselves. While it is true that RPSs may not be able to sustain themselves without generating their own income and kind of trying to become sustainable, economically sustainable in this thing. Without kind of losing out from the social context, that is not engaging with the cultural and social life of the local people over there. Keeping the membership would be difficult, membership becoming active would be difficult, democratic participation would become difficult, governance would become difficult, and the end game could be something that is. So I agree with that, and I would try to sharpen my writing on this thing in this paper as well as in the other in the light of what you have suggested, Professor Mathikuran. Thank you for this thing. Again, Professor Chathukulam, thank you for this comments on the governance index methodological issues that you were raising. We had, in fact, when we had built this index, we had tried this weighted index also. I have not, again, the index actually was built in the earlier paper, and we had used an equal weights thing, and also we had also done PCI, a principal component analysis to build an index using factor loadings and all those things. But what we have presented over here is a simple equal weights using measure as such. But these two are very highly correlated. We have done the correlations, and both the PCI and the other measure was highly correlated. So that's why we did not get into presenting those results. But again, as what you were talking about, building the governance index better in terms of what representation it makes, I think that is something that we are lacking on. While we are not too much worried about whether we should go by a weighted index or a non-weighted index, what should go into the index, I think, so that has become that is becoming a worrying thing. Thank you for your inputs. We will certainly take into consideration on this thing. And people not involved and involved, whether not involved at all, I think there is some confusion over there. Let me just try to sort that confusion. Basically, when we are saying that people involved and not involved, in the first part, that was a demographic profile of all the members within the household. So what we are doing over there is that in a household, if all the members are kind of traced over there, and those who are involved in rubber cultivation, we have identified them as a full-time farmer or a part-time farmer, and those who are not involved in any manner, we have considered them as not involved. But when so that's how each individual in the household is identified, and then we have kind of tallied them up. But when we are discussing the cultivators, we are actually discussing each household where at least one member is a farmer, and that is why they are in the sample. Otherwise, they will not be there in the sample at all. There might be an active member or an inactive member in terms of being their RPS member, but they are certainly a farmer, a grower, a rubber grower, and that is why they are part of the sample. I think they have tried to give some clarity on this thing. But thank you very much for the comments on the governance index. Thank you for appreciating the index, but we would like to build it up, and thank you for the inputs. We will read up. Of course, I have read both your works, both Professor Mathikuran's and Professor Chathukulam's works I have read. Thank you for the comments also.
Any more comments from the online? If not, we can. Yeah. So I have few observations. Of course, it's a very well done research. I appreciate Professor Vinoj for conducting this. I don't see any kind of problems because with our limited knowledge I have with respect to the rubber sector, I don't find any issues with respect to. But of course, there are fine tuning that could be possible. So in that light, I make some comments here. One is that already the sample was very much skewed in terms of general general rubber growers as well as OBC. So already you are mentioning in the paper that there is an exclusion of SC/ST in the sample. So whether it's only in the case of members or non-members, whether there are also members non-members belonging to the SC/ST community, whereas it is not the case with respect to members. So there is a kind of an exclusion that could be possible because of the lack of land. Maybe the SC/ST communities may have very little land, where the rubber board actually, when it provides a subsidy, it actually goes with certain amount of land. And that land has to have certain characteristics, like it should not have any trees inside to get the subsidy and all. So those kind of criteria will kind of evict those people who are kind of aspiring to become rubber growers. So that is one thing. Secondly, the paper, of course, in the methodology, you are mentioning the concepts like involvement, engagement, participation, and also governance. So in the methodology itself, if we can very clearly mention what are these concepts that I'm talking about, we are talking about in the paper, it could actually help. Then the other point is that when we look at the output, value of output or returns from rubber, always rubber, in the case of rubber, the rubber tree becomes a very important kind of a aspect rather than land. Suppose you have an acre of land, but the number of rubber trees in an acre of land is 200, 300, depending upon the strength of the tree. Not that all the trees will exist until the end of the life cycle. So there are chances that number of trees may get lost in the process because of damages, because of plant diseases, because of wind damages and all those things. So that kind of a comparison, if you can make, that will be good, because yield is a function of tree, not a function of land per se. So, and again, the income that you get is also related to the number of trees. So if you have more number of trees in a small acre of land, your chances of getting higher returns is high. So maybe if you can get that information, if the number of trees per acre is collected, that will also help in a better way. And again, the other thing is that age. Rubber trees also, age is also related to the yield. As you age, there is a decline in the cycle is actually declining. You have an increasing yield, then there is a saturated yield, then declining age, a bit declining yield. So when in the initial years you are increasing, age is increasing, but then yield is saturating at some point, then yield is declining. So it's also age related. So yield is a function basically of number of trees per acre, as also the age of the tree. So that kind of, these two things, if you can bring in, if you have the data, you may please look at, because then it becomes technically sound. Then the other points which I am basically talking about may be very much related to the governance index that you are talking about. Again, there was a discussion that many of the members have joined very late. But if you can actually look at some members who have been there from the very beginning, what actually happened to them with respect to their continuity in over the years, whether they have been very confident and they had very good trust in the RPS and also the rubber board. So that kind of relating the existence with respect to the trust building and also the continuity of the RPS could also be looked at. Then the other thing is that, again, that actually leads to RPS as an institutional mediator here. You are also bringing that governance aspect. So there are a lot of things that could be brought into that, as Professor Marty Kurian and Dr. Jose Chathuram talked about, to strengthen that index. Where probably you can look at, there are some RPSs which are already being certified by the rubber board as model RPS, etc. So their governance index can be much better compared to so is there any kind of relation that the RPSs which are model RPSs and where the governance index are good? That is one thing. Then, and again, in the whole process of helping out the farmers, these model RPSs also have a greater role in terms of strengthening the capacities of the farmers. And also if there are women, again, strengthening the capacity of the women who may be in the tapping or who also may be in the rubber cultivation scenario. So how maybe the governance index can also a little look at on some of these things, out of the box kind of aspects. Then the other thing is that some amount of co-design of the future strategies. No, if you actually talk to the farmers, RPSs members and all, you can also talk to them what actually they want in terms of a future model of grower cooperatives. That also some kind of co-designing. You sit with the farmers or farmer groups and think about it. It can be some focus group discussions and all. You can actually design that kind of a model of future RPS to happen. Then, of course, the labor crisis management and all you already have brought into that paper. Then the livelihood enhancement, again, bringing the women. And I see that a lot of building of the farmers' resilience in terms of one is the price risk resilience, and then the other one is climate risk resilience. So how these the RPSs are actually getting reinvented or in terms of increasing their scope of action with respect to finding themselves in terms of helping the farmers in building the resilience, because these are the days we are talking more about resilience of the farming communities and all, and these are also the marginal farmers, and there is also a lot of requirement for the institutions becoming more and more attending towards these kind of resilience building. And the other last point is that some kind of cross learnings. Maybe there are other countries, and most of these countries are also now rubber production is happening in a very, very small marginal kind of a condition. So are there some good cases that can be learned from countries like Thailand? I don't say Malaysia is a good player now, but if you have look at the Indonesia, Thailand and other like Vietnam and all, you can actually, you may see some good models of rubber farming where integration of various other activities, like income sources can also better the livelihoods of them. So whether our RPSs can also bring in some elements of those kind of integration of rubber with other livelihood systems, etc. So if you can largely think about on all these kind of points, and again, if you can reflect on these some of these things in the final conclusion. The other last point is again asset building. Whether many of the RPSs have their own buildings, they have over a period of time they have built assets. So whether that also leads to kind of helping the farmers and again also reflecting in terms of the better governance index, like asset infrastructure, physical infrastructure. They may have their own group processing facilities. So that also can be looked at when you look at the governance index, just rather than only looking at the transparency or accountability aspects. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed, and thank you for inviting me for this. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Professor Vishwanathan, for the comments. I think you have given lots of detailed comments. I don't want to respond to all of things. I think some of these things about methodology, number of trees and age, we need to work on those things to build yield data. Let me see. I'm not very sure whether it is possible to work it out. Governance index, I think it is possible to work on those things. We can build, but number of trees and age. Trees, I think it is there, but age, I think that's a really difficult. You need to have plots themselves, no plot for each age. That I don't think we have collected that data at all. Then the other things, I think so. Yeah, with the core design of future strategies, these things are things that we need to, when we are thinking about kind of recommendations, we can actually think about these things, so bringing and cross learning from other countries and all. Asset building we have done this in the earlier paper, but we have not looked at whether it's been beneficial for members, but we have looked at whether RPS's performance, how it is affected. So we can connect it. We will do that in the next work that we are continuing. Thank you very much for the comment. Yeah.
So with that, we close this seminar. Thank you so much for participation. Thank you all.